academic and research experience span is near 27 years with 2 years of industrial experience. Her field of interest are wound care materials, healthcare, textiles, knitted fabric structure, fabric design, and technical textile. She has also received award for Best Professor Textile Technology, which was presented by Golden Name Award for Excellence and Leadership in Education in the year 2020. And Professor Indra Parikh 50 Women in Education Leaders Award at the World Education Congress in 2019. She has contributed 75 publications in international and national journal, including several book chapters and conference proceedings. So I request Dr. Monica Sikka ma'am to present her presentation on a topic weaves for the fabric design. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Smriti. Good afternoon to everyone. I hope I am audible to all of you.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So being the last session of the day, I think it has been it would be like a long day for all of you, but I would like to try to make my presentation a bit interesting so that after lunch everybody just picks up a bit. So if it would be an interactive session, I would feel very happy rather than me just talking for an hour or so. So you can post your questions or queries during the presentation also in the chat box, and I would try to answer or address all of them. Apart from that, as I told in the earlier session, that there are some issues that have been raised by the participants in the WhatsApp group regarding feedback and attendance. So we'll be just giving you a detail about all these aspects by today evening or tomorrow. And of the question paper also, that the test that you have to appear for at the end of this course. So now I will begin with the presentation that I have to make today, that is on basic weaves for fabric design. Also, I have been teaching this subject for last more than 20 years to the BTech level students. So I think this is the only subject in the whole course which arises some kind of say, great interest among the students to work for, because they have to just do it in a different way as compared to just going through the books or notes or the slides. They have to prepare the graphical presentations and analyze the samples. So this is a bit more interesting than what normally they go through in the 7 semesters. So if, for me also this subject has been quite close to my heart since I've been teaching it for so long, and I have tried to develop it over this time, and hope whatever I present today is helpful for you all also. I'm just sharing my screen. Just tell me if you're able to see the screen.
And your screen is not visible.
I'm just trying.
Okay. Yes, ma'am, your screen is visible. You can start
Okay,
with
I'm making it full screen. Is it okay now?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
Full screen. Yes, ma'am. Okay.
Okay, so as I explained before, that we're going to discuss about different weaves that I use for fabric designing. Basically, I will be touching upon the four basic weaves, that is plain twill, satin, and sateen. But also, I would like to discuss with you some more simple weaves like which have very characteristic features like huckaback, mocklino, honeycomb.
And you are not audible.
उनका पाठ मुझे मत सिखाओ उल्टा चाहो
Hello.
Available in this sector, textile industry, that needs to be very well understood if we have they employ them in the designing of the fabric. So the marriage of technology with weaving and the push to achieve cutting-edge design and performance, whether in isolation or through combination of different disciplines or with other disciplines, that's the need of the hour. The weave that we'll be talking about, or the weaves we normally talk about, they cover a broad spectrum of fabrics in use within the apparel, furnishings, transportation, and performance textiles. So that's why I pointed out in the beginning that when we talk about fabric designing, now at this point, we have to talk about both traditional and technical textile designing. And depending upon the performance requirements, sometimes you have to play with the weaves, you have to modify the weaves, or you have to change the placement of the threads in the weaves so that you can get the particular kind of not only the functionality, but also if you want a kind of a aesthetic appearance, that too is not hampered by changing those styles. So woven fabrics, we all know, are made by interlacing two sets of threads, which are at right angles, warp and weft. And by lifting the warp threads in different combinations, the threads are interlaced to form a vast range of cloth types that you can use in different areas. And the machine that we use for this purpose is a loom. Everybody knows that. And the changes that normally we have to do for creating different types of design depends upon the hardness or shaft groups of warp yarns that we lift or drop during those combinations. That will create actually the final design. So in fabric designing, normally we teach this thing only, that how do you create a weave by lifting or dropping of the threads. There are three, I hope many of you might be knowing about this. There are three plans which normally define a design structure. Those are lifting, drafting, and the denting plans. And each of them actually defines that how the yarns would be moving through the dents, how they will be moving, would be raised or lowered during the process. That actually, the combination of all these three plans actually create different types of structure. And if we talk about the weft insertion, initially when the thing started, for centuries, this weaving was carried out by hand in the home on a cottage industry basis. So there, the two processes of spinning and weaving were carried out side by side in the home. The mechanization of this spinning and weaving although improved the quality of the thread available and enabled 100% cotton fabrics to be produced, but it had its own drawbacks. But yes, we are developing new methods of weft insertion, and we have developed new methods of weft insertion to get mass production at a higher rate. So initially it was done by hand, then later it was the shuttle was used for the weft insertion. Now we have the non-conventional way of inserting the weft, which is like rapiers we are using, air jet, water jet, projectile. So those types of non-conventional weaving processes have helped in improving the speeds plus the mass production of the fabrics. The staple cloth for thousands of years, woven fabrics is used for a broad spectrum of end uses, from decorative to functional, and these may be produced to meet an aesthetic need. When we talk about apparels, when we talk about upholstery, or we talk about those fabrics which you need to have some kind of design, good design appearance, then we talked about the aesthetic value. But when we talk about technical textiles like geotextiles or medical textiles or sport textiles, then we are more worried about the performance rather than their aesthetic appearance. So woven fabrics are used in apparels for lingerie, ladies wear, outerwear, suiting, shirting, sportswear. For interiors, they can be used for curtains, soft furnishings, upholstery, carpets, and bedding. So the specialty usage, as I already pointed out, it is done in the various areas of technical textiles. Now, what are the key issues which affect the affects the designer while he's doing this designing process using the different kinds of weaves? We know that the weavers have a rich and varied past to draw from, and the continual strive to innovate and create new surface qualities. And fabric blends has created new combinations of fibers and weaves. So what normally I'll be discussing today also for different weaves, you will see that a simple plain weave has, say, verified or has been categorized into a number of derivatives depending upon minor modifications being done to the plain weave itself. So those minor modifications gave a different types of textural appearance, different types of performance of the fabrics, and this concept only was kept in mind when the other weaves were developed and their derivatives were developed. So now derivatives cannot be developed randomly. Like you cannot make a slight change in already existing weave and say that I have developed the derivative. It has to be tried and tested so that if you're making the change to have some better aesthetic appearance, it does not affect the performance of the fabric, or you are doing it for the performance, so it does not affect the aesthetic value of the fabric. So it has to be optimized between the two. You cannot make that random changes in a fabric structure or design and prepare a new weave. So the creative process for the design of woven fabric can take on many forms and is often dependent on the context of the designer and the end use of their fabrics. The inspiration for weave designs, it starts in the same way as for the fabric type, but the translation of an idea may not always be literal. Why? Because of the specific nature of the woven fabric. When you change the color, texture, and handle, they are more likely to be interpreted into the final cloth rather than only creating the graphical paper design. So you might feel that changing this design in this way will create the required change in the aesthetic appearance of the fabric, but actually when you produce it on the loom using different colors and textures and materials, then the final cloth might look a bit different or perform a bit different. So the weave design is traditionally carried out using point paper, as I already told you, that is the graphical representations that correspond to the ends to be lifted in the loom. So this, I think most of you might be knowing that how these graphical representations are made and what are the different signs that I use for representing. I'll be showing you in the next slides also. So there is a blurring of technologies, that the boundaries between the long established fabric categories are being blurred as technologies are no longer restricted by their perennial function as the coexistence of craft and technology move forward. So there have been new developments in yarns and finishes. There are different types of prints and coatings that help in the progression of the woven fabric design. So we are not restricted by only changing the movement of the warp threads. There are many other factors now there which are playing into with the innovation and the creation of new types of yarns and finishes and fibers. And cutting edge designers always consider these in combination rather than in isolation. So whenever you are developing a final fabric design, you have to see all the factors that will play in the final look and the performance of the fabric. Talking about the niche versus mass market, the apparel industry is one where it is a benefit to have a good solid background in textiles. Why? Because you are actually going to gain name in the market, and that's not only the mass market. You want a kind of a niche product that you want to produce. So universities and colleges are continually refreshing the content of the textile courses in order to provide their graduates with the design and technology skills to succeed in these fast-paced and demanding textile and retail industries. Even we at NIT Jalandhar, we keep revising the curriculum of the textile courses in collaboration with the industry people and people who are actually working in the textile arena, so that we can create graduates who have the knowledge of the market along with the technical aspects of developing a fabric. The commercial textile designers in industry require a different approach to design creation and development, even though their education may have been identical to that of a craft weaver. So there's a difference between when we talk about a weave designer and a craft weaver. If anybody would like to answer this, like, do you know the difference between the two, the craft weaver and the weave designer? Is there a difference, first of all? That is the question. When we say a craft weaver, we are simply talking about a person who has been provided with a certain kind of say pattern, and he is just weaving that pattern over the time. But a weave designer will first see the feasibility of a particular design, make the desired modifications, and check if it is possible to weave, like if he is actually making the changes in that design. So tight deadlines, cost and productivity demands, coupled with performance requirements, all have to be taken into account, and this necessitates a more considered approach to the design process. So when we talk about the weave designers, they have to keep all these points in mind when they're making the slight changes in the design pattern. The most commonly used weave structures and their applications are going to be detailed in the presentation today. And I'm going, as I told you in the beginning, I'll be touching the plain weave, twill, satin and sateen in detail, and then we'll touch upon the other 2-3 categories of simple weaves, which actually create a very different textural effect on the fabric and give you some kind of specific performance that is needed from those fabrics, right? So starting with the simplest form of weave, that is plain weave. Everybody is aware of this structure and very widely used, may it be traditional textiles or may it be, say, the technical textiles. And it has been given different types of names also. So you don't have to get confused by reading them. So it is sometimes plain weave is sometimes called as calico, sometimes tabby. This is one of the elementary weave constructions. And although the simple is used for more frequently than any other weave, the warp threads which are lifted in plain weave, they are done in an alternate fashion, allowing the weft yarn to interlace with every other end. And we form a very tight and firm structure suitable for a wide range of end users. The cloth can be very flat, making this type of weave suitable for printing, pleating, smoking, or any kind of, say, surface enhancement if you want in these fabrics. So the range of applications of this weave are very wide, and the fabric types that usually use these plain weave structures, they include the commercial names. If I speak, you'll be able to relate to it more, like voiles and chiffons, canvas. These are the fabrics where this plain weave is employed. But if you have seen these fabrics, you will understand that how different they look. Although the weave that has been used in these fabrics are plain weaves. So voile, if you see, is a kind of a semi-sheer and lightweight fabric with fine, high twisted yarns. Those are originally made from cotton, but they are using other fibers also for making it. And if we talk about canvas, that is a relatively heavy and rigid fabric. Again, plain woven only, can be made from cotton, linen or jute. So what I mean to say here is that a same weave with a combination of different types of yarn and the ends per inch and picks per inch and the arrangement and the lifting, you can get different kinds of effects on the fabric surface and use them for varied end uses. So we talk about the characteristic features of this plain weave. It has maximum number of binding points. The threads interlace in an alternate order, as I have already mentioned. The thread density is limited. The cloth thickness and mass per unit area are limited. And they produce a relatively stronger fabric that is obtained by any other simple combination of threads. So simplest and strongest, you can say. These are a few pictures which will just show you how the plain weave looks in the fabric, and this is representing the graphical representation of a plain weave. So I am not going into say much details of this because you are all people from textile background, so this thing is understandable that a cross represents a warp up and a blank represents warp down, and this way you represent any kind of weave on the graphical paper, which is then interpreted by the person on the loom, and the arrangements required for weaving such kind of any particular kind of fabric is first made, and then the fabric is woven. Now these plain fabric then can be developed into checks and stripes using different colors. The weave here is plain only. In all these structures that you see in the slide, the weave is plain only, but playing with the colors on the warp and the weft side, these kind of stripes and checks can be created. Now these stripes and checks can also be created by using different weaves. That is a different class of weave altogether. So that's why we term these as plain checks and stripes. We have stripes and check weaves where you use combinations of weaves to create stripes and checks. That means you will have a portion which will have, say, a plain weave, and another portion adjacent to it which might have a hopsack weave. Then again you have a plain weave section, then you have a hopsack weave section, and that way you create a textural effect which will look like stripes to you in the fabric. But here we are talking about only plain weave. These stripes and checks here have been created by using different colors in the warp and the weft. So plain weave is obtained by raising all even numbered warp ends at one pick and raising all the odd numbered ones at the other pick, and it means threads interlace in alternate order. The range of application is wide. It is used for structures which range from very heavy and coarse canvas fabric and blankets made of thick yarns to the lightest and finest cambrics and muslins made in extremely fine yarns. So playing with the yarns itself, you can create different types of fabric effects using a plain weave. And it finds, as told you, it finds extensive uses. You can use them in different types of fabrics from lightest weight to the heaviest weight. Now, in the beginning, as I told you that the weaves and they have been basic weaves, they have been modified into many varied structures where a slight change in the movement of the warp threads has created a different effect on the fabric surface and altogether a different kind of performance that you get from them. So in the similar way, plain weave derivatives can be just categorized or classified into these different types. So I'll be touching upon the major types here, where you will just understand how the changes happen. We talk about the warp ribbed fabrics, with the only change here is an extension of the say the warp that is kept up on one pick has been taken to two. It can be taken into three, or there's an extension in the warp direction of the plain weave that creates this warp ribbed fabric, and see the effect on the fabric that has happened because of this. You saw the plain weave picture also. You can see this, that you can create a rib kind of structure on the fabric surface by just causing an extension in the warp direction of this plain weave. Further, they can be balanced or imbalanced structures, like here you have 2:2 warp rib. You can have a combination where it could be unbalanced, where it is in the figure D, if you see it is 4:2. So each of them, although is resulting in a rib kind of structure, but there's a further scope of playing with them if you want a smaller and a longer rib following each other on the fabric surface. Similarly, weft ribs, they are created by extending the plain weave in the weft direction, and the way you are getting the ribs in the longitudinal direction on the fabric surface, here you'll be getting the ribs in the horizontal direction. So the same concept, they can be regular or irregular, balanced or imbalanced, depending upon what extension you are giving the two alternate points of the plain weave. If it's equal, it's balanced. If it's unequal, it's unbalanced. So the figure D again here shows a unbalanced weft rib weave. In both these rib weaves, the appearance of the cloth depends on the respective thread settings, and to achieve good effects, it is necessary to weave a weft rib with a higher number of picks per inch and a comparatively low number of ends per inch. And if we talk about the bark rib, it's going to be the opposite. You have higher number of ends per inch and comparatively low number of picks per inch in that case. And whenever you're producing a design effect on the fabric surface, the most important point that the designers have to keep in mind is that the prominency of the design should be such that it is very clearly visible on the fabric surface. So that prominency has to be increased by use of suitable yarns and the set of the fabric, SETT, the fabric set, so that the actual design that you really have modified the weave for is clearly visible to the person who's seeing that fabric. So the dependence of all rib constructions upon the correct thread setting is marked. So these 2 points are important. Suitable use of the yarns and the correct thread settings that will affect your prominency of the structure that you're trying to produce. So this is another two pictures where you can see the use of this rib weaves in the the metalless cloth, they call it, which is a combination of different lengths of ribs with different colors. And then it is also used in the window blinds that you see nowadays, which have been put in sets for covering the windows. So there also this kind of structure is mostly used, and most of the upholstery fabrics. Then mat rib is again another modification to the plain weave where you're doing an extension in both the warp and the weft direction. So actually this is a combination of the warp and the weft rib. So you are extending your plain weave in both the directions. In this case, if you see this graph, it's been extended in the warp direction and the weft direction both. Again, you can have this extension limited to 2 or more, depending upon what type of structure you have to be creating. So this mat weave, it has extensive usage for different fabrics like shirtings, and it is very widely used in sailcloth. The sail that you put upon the boats, that is mainly made of this kind of mat structure, which actually gives you a greater strength in both the warp and weft direction by having, especially 2:2. If we talk about the extension of, say, this kind of figure that has been graphical representation that is given at A, is mainly used for making this sail fabric, so that you have the required strength for bearing the wind force with which the wind strikes the sail cloth. Of course, you can have regular and irregular structures also in this, depending upon what extensions you are giving in the warp and the weft direction. The next basic weave is a twill weave. Again, we all are aware of this weave, which has a very specific or characteristic feature of having diagonal lines appearing on the fabric surface. So they can be regular, where your twill line runs at 45 degrees, or you can have an irregular or steep twill where the angle of the twill line is greater than 45 degrees. So these twill lines usually run from the bottom left to the right, a right-handed twill, and you can have a left-handed twill also running from the other side. So the twill fabrics, they are strong, they are durable, they have a natural kind of stretch in the bias direction, which actually makes them suitable for both furnishings and fashion. So the most common example that we see around us for twill weaves is a denim fabric, where normally a 3-up 1-down twill is being used for making those fabrics. And it is a warp face twill, usually made from yarn dyed cotton warp, and is suitable and stiff because we wear it very in a very casual way for everyday wear. So you need to have some kind of weave which is strong enough to wear for the everyday wear purpose. Also, it is being used in tweeds. If you have heard about, it's traditionally made from wool and is usually a medium to heavyweight fabric. Uh, they also feature other structures apart from twill. Tweeds not only are made from twills, they also have sometimes hog sack structure being used for them or another modified form of twills. But the performance levels with the normal twill made from wool gives you the best effect in tweeds. So the basic characteristics, if we talk about the twill beads, they form diagonal lines as mentioned from one selvage to another. It has more ends per unit area and picks per unit area than the plain cloth. Lesser binding points in case of this, because plain itself is, you cannot go below one up, one down, which is the plain fabric. So all those weaves which are following the plain fabric, of course, have lesser binding points as compared to the plain cloth. Of course, a better cover because the fabric you have a kind of a float between, say, extending up to 2, 3 or more threads, and so the threads can be placed more closer to each other. So we have a better cover, more cloth thickness and mass per unit area as compared to plain weave. And it looks something like this when you see it on the fabric structure. This is a 2 up, 1 down twill, which is being shown in this figure. You can see when you make the graphical representation of this weave, you actually start seeing the diagonal lines on the graphical representation itself. Of course, if it is appearing here, it will be seen very clearly on the fabric surface. Now, also because here you're creating a kind of a design effect on the fabric surface, so we are much worried about the prominency of these twills. So that's why there are some factors which control the prominency of the twill appearance or the diagonal line appearance on the fabric surface, which need to be kept in mind when you are using twill weave designs. So before I discuss those points, there's a classification of these twill weaves which has been made by modifying the basic twills. Ordinary or continuous twill we already know, that I've shown you in the earlier slide. Then you have a zigzag effect being created using the twill lines. So zigzag, as it is, we understand it's the lines moving in different directions from the lower to upper portion and then back to the lower portion. So combining different twill lines in different direction, you can get this zigzag effect. So that is one classification which is kept under the modification of these twill weaves. Then you have rearranged twills, through which you can create satin or sateen weaves, which is a component of rearrangement of the twills itself. Then you have broken twills, you have combination twills, you have figured and other related twills. So I'll be discussing them one by one. And where do you find their usage, why they were developed. So all these twills that are listed in the above list, they can be bark face twill or weft face twill, or a combination of the two. So bark face twill would mean that you have, example is that you have the number of warps per unit area more than the weft, that is 3 up, 1 down, 4 up, 1 down, 3 up, 2 down. So these could be called warp face twills. Whereas weft face twills are expressed as 1 up, 3 down, 2 up, 3 down. So these kind of twills are weft face twills. Or you can have 4 up, 4 down, where you have a combination of warp and weft face twills. So these are the examples that are shown for continuous twills. In the figure A, the bark thread floats over all the picks in a repeat except one. So the minimum repeat size is for making this kind of twill will depend upon the addition of the numerator and the denominator, which represents the twill. So if it's 2 up, 1 down, adding the numerator and denominator will get 3. So 3 into 3 will be the minimum repeat size on which you can complete this twill. So I hope all of you know that how you construct the twill on a graphical paper. So deciding the repeat size from the available skin notation for the twill, you can construct the twill on the graphical paper on a bigger repeat size than what is required for minimum size required for that twill, and see the effect that it produces on the graphical surface. So same effect is going to be reproduced on the final fabric. In the figure B, if you see, the weft thread floats over the bark on all picks in a repeat except one. So the first figure A is a bark face twill because the numerator is higher than the denominator. B represents weft face twill where your denominator is higher, and C represents an equal distribution of bark and weft floats. So you call it as a balanced twill. This could be unbalanced also if you change the number. So first or second form unbalanced, we can call them unbalanced. But 2 up, 2 down, 3 up, 3 down, 4 up, 4 down, these are balanced twills where you have both the warp and weft floating equally. So mentioning the prominency of the twill lines, there are a few factors that I told you that determine the prominency of these twills. One is the nature of the yarn, the nature of the weave, the warp and weft transparency, and the relative direction of twill and yarn twist. So nature of the yarn, when we say, the nature of the yarn, and when we say we're talking about the fine and the coarse type of yarn that we use. The finer the yarn, the more clearly the design appearances. So moreover, when we talk about the yarn texture, we don't prefer using yarns which have been applied with raised finishes, because the raised finishes actually cause the protruding fibers to raise from the yarn surface, and if you have any kind of design being inserted in the fabric using those yarns, it will be totally concealed by those raised fibers. So we don't prefer using such yarns. So you have to be very careful that whenever you are producing a fabric, particular fabric, it should create a surface texture where the prominency of the design is there, right? So nature of the weave, of course, is very prominently affecting the design appearance. Like if we say balanced or unbalanced twills, or warp phase twill or weft phase twills, will actually tell you the prominency of the diagonal line will appear in which direction. Of course, warp and weft threads, that is the fabric set that you are using, affects the prominency. And the most important point is the relative direction of the twill and the yarn twist. The direction of the twill and the yarn, that the twist that you're giving to the yarn, which is normally S or Z, the combination of the two affects the prominency very clearly. So if they are, say, the relative direction of the twill is moving in the S direction, and your yarn has a twist in the same direction, then the appearance of the twill line might not be as prominent as when you have them in the opposite direction. So these few points, if kept in mind, can say create a more clearer design appearance in the fabric that you are making. Talking about the zigzag or wavy twills, you can see the effect as I told you here. You simply have a combination of two diagonal lines which are moving once in one from lower to the upper portion and then down to the other portion. Combining this, you can create the zigzag effect in the fabric. So the diagonal lines, they proceed either to left or right, and where the two lines meet, they create a point forming a continuous zigzag effect in the fabric. So this is the kind of appearance you get in the fabric, and this is the graphical representation. So most of the designs which have a certain kind of say particular design appearance, it shows very clearly in the graphical representation if you make it correctly and neatly on a graph paper. So you can easily judge out what kind of effect is. Yes, of course, when you're going, you have to play with the colors and see the effect. Then of course you have to go for CAD to see that if you change the colors, how would it look on the fabric surface. The design pattern will remain the same, but the effect due to the change in the color or texture of the yarn can be seen only when you are seeing it through a CAD system. Rearranged twills, this is a modification to the way you make the twills, the way you construct the twills. That actually results into a very common type of weave that is, or we now consider it in the basic weave, which is the satin and sateen weaves, which have a typical kind of characteristic feature of having only one binding point in a particular repeat size. So this satin and sateen weaves, you will be seeing that it is being used very widely, even in some of the technical applications. Out of this, satin weave is a warp-faced rearranged twill, and sateen, double E, it is a rearranged weft-faced twill. And normally when you see a satin or sateen fabric, the reverse side of one will be the would represent the other type of weave. So if the front looks like satin, the reverse side is a sateen. So why do we say that? You will come to understand when you see the graphical representation of the two. The satin is made of filament fibers, while satin is made up of short staple spun, but it is now modified. You can use any type of fibers in any of them. And they are used in combination with other weaves, particularly in case of ornamented fabrics. So these weaves, I am talking individually, but nowadays you can get different kinds of textural effects and performance by using combination of these weaves also. Like one example I gave you for say stripes and checks. There you can go for a combination of the plain weave with the twill. But of course, when you are using such kind of arrangements, then you have to keep in mind that the two twills should not be varying in their intersections a lot, because then the yarn take up from the beam is going to be different for the two sections, and that will not allow you to weave the fabric properly. The striking feature of these weaves is their bright appearance and smooth feel. So this makes these weaves to be used very widely for fabrics which need to appear bright and beautiful. So as already discussed, the characteristic features being that it is either warp or jet phase, depending on that you call them satin or sateen. They have no prominent weave structure. There is only one binding point at each end or pin. There are no continuous twill lines in this, although you see diagonal lines appearing, but they are not continuous. So more thread density is possible in this case, since you have only one binding point in the structure. More mass per unit area is possible, and more float length. So satin fabric, if you see in the fabric, it appears like this. And if you see this one, you will not be able to judge it with the naked eye that this is a satin fabric. There you are actually making the weave in a twill fashion only. But because there's only one binding point, if you see in this particular cross-sectional view, you will see that only at one binding point, this weft yarn is moving over the first warp yarn. On all others, it is down. So because of this, you can place the yarns very closely to each other, and even this one binding point is covered by the adjacent yarn. So when this binding point is covered, you actually have a very planar surface through which the light can reflect easily, and that shining or bright appearance is there. So because of the kind of interlacing that you give to them, you can have a very lustrous appearance of fabric when you're using a satin or sateen weave. So this is the representation here. Here you use a reversed convention for representing warp up and warp down. Normally we say cross represents warp up. In this case, we consider it as warp down, and using that only these have been considered. So this one dots that you see in the graph, they are representing that one binding point that you have in the structure. So this can be like a regular or an irregular satin, and since there's a certain kind of way you construct it. Normally in twill, what we do, we move one step up and one step forward for making the twill. But in case of the satin and sateen, this one step up is fine, but the steps forward or the count that we take for the steps forward, it depends upon a certain rule. And I think you must be aware of those rules, that you cannot use one, you cannot use a number less than the total repeat size, you cannot take a number which is the total repeat size, you cannot take a factor or a multiple of the total repeat size. So apart from those numbers, the numbers which are left after removing according to these rules, that is used for preparing the satin or sateen weave. And in numbers like 4 and satin or 6 and satin, we don't get any count which will satisfy the rule that with which we make the satin and sateen. So in that case, we have to use again another type of construction method, and the weave created out of those construction methods are called irregularity. So wherever you do not get a count value according to the rules that have been set for making a satin or sateen, that there you create an irregular satin or sateen using a different rule. So on that basis, we categorize them into regular and irregular. So this is again a representation where you are taking a say movement of or count of, say, I'll take the B figure where we have just taken, say, suppose we are making a satin weave. So first cross is kept here, then you move 2 points, or we say sateen, you move 2 points further for making the next score. and then we again move 1, 2 here. And in this case, since this is a 4-end satin, so we are going to use a different kind of construction method where you will vary your count value after half the picks. Abhi yahan pe, this is 1, 2. Again, here we have taken 1, 2, 3. Again 1, 2. So this is a 4-end satin where you cannot create a regular satin weave. So that's why we have constructed an irregular. So this is an example of a irregular weave. Even in this case. So 4 and 6 are the only ones where you cannot get a count number which will satisfy the rule with which a normal satin or sateen is made. So those rules I'm not going to discuss here. They are given in any books or notes. But you ought to know that there are 2 types of structures that you can create out of satin and sateen. So this table also represents the same thing. We can prepare 5, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, any number of ends. Only 4 and 6 are the numbers where the regular satins cannot be produced. And there we produce the irregular satin or satins. So they have applications in denims, interlining clothing, ribbons, dress materials because they are bright and lustrous, so they're very widely used for women dress materials especially. Then we have broken twills. The name itself will explain that what broken twills mean, that you're breaking the regular twills at certain points and creating a different effect on the fabric. So you can see in the fabric itself, the lines seem broken at faces. So you can break it on the bark side, you can break it on the weft side in groups of 2 or 3 or 4, and you can have directional effect on the fabric surface. Normally these kind of twills are used in the suiting and shirting fabrics. Okay. If we talk the wider application of all different types of twills, you can find their applications in khaki uniforms, in linen cloths, in blankets, suitings, soft furnishings. So these are 2 pictures which are showing the use of these zigzag twill being used in a blanket structure. Now these 3 basic weaves have some basic differences in them. If we talk about the particular properties related to these weaves, the surface effect, if we talk about in plain, it is flat. In this you have twill, you have diagonal lines. In satin, although you are creating a kind of twilling effect only, but because the yarns are very close to each other, so you can have a very smooth and lustrous effect on the fabric surface. Of course, the luster is poor in plain, it's fair in twill, and very good in satin or sateen fabrics. The tearing strength is low in plain, it's medium in twill, but quite high in satin. Now, tearing strength is directly related to the yarns which are able to bear the load that you are applying on the fabric. So since the yarns are almost parallel and lying close to each other in satin fabric, so the tearing strength is quite high in this case. The snap resistance, of course, is good in plain and twill, but it's poor because of the long floats that you have in satin. Wrinkle resistance is poor in plain. We very well know unless you iron these plain fabrics, you cannot remove those wrinkles. Twill, it's fair, and satin being again the yarns being quite parallel to each other and straight, so you have a good wrinkle resistance in this. Now coming to a little more lesser known weaves. We are not talking to the category of basic weaves, but they have a certain kind of very characteristic features to them which allow them to be used for a specific kind of fabric, that is absorbent fabrics. So you have a combination of a strong weave and a float region. The float region gives you the required absorbency, and the other, say, a plain weave usage can give you the required strength. So if you use all the floats in the fabric, the strength actually reduces. The float always reduces the strength because float is created by straight yarns which are not interlacing, and strength comes from interlacing. So if you want to have both the effects of both the things in a fabric, then you need to combine them together. And Hakapet weave is one example where you have this combination, and it can be used for making soft and moisture absorbent fabrics, where you have a combination of a plain weave for the firmness of the fabric and the portion where you have long floats which will give you the absorbency. Right? So these weaves are generally applied in manufacturing of non-pile towels. So towels are also of 2 types, as I think you must be knowing. One are the pile towels, where you see those loops and piles on the fabric surface, which help in the required absorbency, which are high quality and good quality towels. But you have towel or absorbent structures being made from these types of absorbent weaves also, which are a category of cheap towels, you can say, but they have certain kind of absorbency. So they are also put under the non-pile towels category. So if you see the structure, the Huckaback weaves look something like this in the fabric surface. So you see this portion of the fabric is a plain weave, one up, one down, and here you have long floats. So it's a combination of, say, a plain woven area, which is shown in the graph at this region, and then you have this region where you have long floats, which will give you absorbency. And this is shown by the graph in this case. In this case, you have the floats, and here you have one up, one down plain weave that has been inserted. And you do it alternately so that you can compensate for the strength along with the getting the required absorbency in the fabric. Okay. So features, if we talk about repeat size, normally minimum repeat size that is used for Huckaback weave is 10 by 10. You can get the weave effect in the form of stripes and checks. It looks like stripes and checks if you watch it carefully. Not exactly, but you see that kind of effect on the fabric surface. Then the surface is rough, of course, because of the combination of two different types of structures. And linen and cotton yarns are commonly used for making this. And the main application is towels only. Sometimes you also use them for the shirting dress here. But since we have produced or we have made these the designs keeping in mind of getting a kind of absorbency in the structure, so we use them in towels most often. Another very peculiar type of structure that can be created is using honeycomb weaves. These are partial, the weaves resemble, or the surface texture of the weave that resembles to a honeycomb cell of wax. If you see these small kind of cells that we on the fabric surface, these are type of hexagonal cells you normally see in a beehive where the bees store their honey. So that's why this name has been given to these honeycomb structures where you have ridges and hollows which appear like cell. But these are created again with a combination of bark floats. So you have a kind of absorbency being introduced into the structure using these weaves also. So classification of these weaves are ordinary and Brighton depending upon the way you are constructing it. You're simply creating diamond forms in the different sections of these weaves, and finally when you combine them it appears also in the form of a diamond, and this is actually the cell structure that you are seeing on that surface, on the first surface of the fabric. Similar way you can create it in the case of Brighton also, but the difference lies in the appearance of the cell structure. In case of ordinary honeycomb, you see the similar effect, cell-like structures appearing on both the sides, but in Brighton you see the effect only on one side. Of course, they are rough in appearance because of these cell structures, and the main usage again because of the moisture absorbency is in the hand towels and bath mats. So wherever you will have long floats appearing in the fabric, you can expect the absorbency feature appearing in that structure. Again, since you're seeing those floats, kind of floats being appearing on the fabric surface, so this particular structure again qualifies for being a absorbent fabric. And Brighton honeycomb, if you see, you have these cell-like structures in all the four quadrants, and this gives you a more intricate kind of cell appearance on the fabric surface as compared to ordinary honeycomb. The only difference is it can be seen on only one side in Brighton honeycomb, and in case of ordinary honeycomb, you see it on both the sides. So these pictures actually are representing the cell appearance in a Brighton honeycomb structure. End uses, although the weave is not as popular as ordinary honeycomb, but it is used in similar qualities for more decorative end uses such as quilts and brocades, and in some cases hand towels. So if you're using them in towels or bath furnishings, then you go for ordinary honeycomb. But you have to, if you have to have some this cell-like appearance effect in case of other products like brocades, then you go for using the Brighton honeycomb where you can use finer yarns and have these kind of textural appearance on the fabric surface. Third category in this is the Mocclino weaves, which appear in the form of net-like structures. One way of creating net-like structures is a lino effect that you produce using duped needles, if you have heard about it. The normal needles that we use are the simple heels used on the loom frame, but for making, say, looped net-like structures, we use duped needles, and a lino weaves are produced from them. But if you want to produce a similar effect or an imitation effect of the lino weaves, then these Mocclino weaves can be employed to create certain kind of a netting appearance in the fabric surface. Now, how is this done? This is done by using a combination again of, say, a motif which has long flows and areas where you have the, say, the herringbone effect or the mirror image effect of this in the adjacent quadrants. So if you see in here, this is representing a huckaback weave, but this is representing a Mocclino weave where you are simply producing the herringbone. I didn't talk about the herringbone before because I think that's a very common type of twill where you are producing a mirror image of the twill effect in the second part of the weave. So similar thing is happening here, that you are creating the points where there are no intersections in the first region. So you simply overlap this and the whole place here should be covered with points. That's the concept that we use in herringbone. The same kind of technique we use here to create a kind of, say, total float in the adjacent portion by using a motif of longer floats in the adjacent quadrant. So this kind of arrangement will create these kinds of small holes in the fabric structure, which will appear in the form of a netted fabric. So the weaves can be divided here into diagonally equal parts, and it is an open perforated weave kind of structure. The main, say, the technical aspect in producing in these types of weaves is that you have to be careful with the denting plan of these weaves. The ends from each individual group, they are drawn from the same dent, and they actually are floating together in the fabric, so they can be placed quite close and the rest can be placed a little far, so that an unequal distance between the threads during denting will create the kind of the perforated appearance on the fabric surface. Of course, they are used for embroidery cloths. जो आप matte weave use करते हो, या not matte weave, but the embroidery cloth that we use for making cross stitch and other kind of embroideries, that is a product of this Mocclino structure. Then of course you have certain kind of window curtains also being made out of this structure, and the dress wear, women dress wear in combination with plain and twill can also be created. Finally, we have the crepe weaves, which have a broken surface. You might have, the females in the group can really relate with this. We use a lot of crepe fabric for our garments. So it has low luster, but it is this kind of, say, pebbly or stony appearance on the fabric surface is achievable by using either crepe yarns, or we can have a kind of embossing effect on the plain weave and get this effect. But when we talk about crepe weaves, we are actually creating this, say, seed-like appearance on the fabric surface using different kinds of combinations of weaves. So one series of warp and one series of weft, which are used for making this kind of weave, will be actually placed in such a way that it can give you a cranking appearance on the fabric, or a broken surface appearance on the fabric surface. See, this crepe effect is a kind of, say, what should I say, a pebbly surface effect. But it can be achieved either through using crepe yarn, which are highly twisted yarn, or it can be created by using embossing. The weave can, in that case, can be plain or twill. But this effect can be produced. But that effect, it does not give you the similar kind of, say, prominency as you can get by using crepe weaves. So crepe weaves used to create the crepe effect. So that is more authentic as compared to using the crepe yarns or embossing. So there are different ways that you construct the crepe weave. I'm not going into details of this, but you are using the basic weaves, combining them in different ways to create a crepe effect. So it is the crepe weaves, depending upon a satin base, you create a satin base and then you modify it into a crepe structure. Then you can use it with a floating weave with plain threads. You can use small motifs inserted at different parts along with a combination of another weave. Or you can insert one weave on the other. There are different examples available, and all this designing that I'm talking about has actually been developed by say hit and trial methods. As I told in the beginning, yes, you can go for modifications to already existing weaves and create new kind of constructions, which will give you different kind of design appearance, which might appeal to the customer, but then it should not affect the basic or the intrinsic properties of that fabric. कोई random आप designing नहीं कर सकते, कुछ भी करो. You have to go for hit and trial method so that both your aesthetic and the performance values are maintained. Of course, these crepe weaves are used to produce shirting and decorative materials, home furnishings, and ladies' wear, as already pointed out. So, covering all these basic structure or simple structures, we now have to compile all this information to understand that how the what are the design applications of the weaves that we are talking about. So, woven fabrics have been designed as length, and then they are converted into a say a garment. As compared to knitted. Knitted when you're producing sometimes the garment length on the
Catch now.
yes. Okay. So fabric producers for both apparel and furnishing design ranges each season from which their customers select fabrics for the next season's collection. So you have to make some modifications to the color and design, which normally the brand the companies which are making the branded fabric, they request so that they can have their own identity for the ready-to-wear collections. So you have a basic design construction, but then some changes are requested by the company itself or the company which is making the brands to have its own signature thing, right? So haute couture garments use some of the highest quality unique fabrics that are available. And performance fabrics for end use are normally the technical textile fabrics which are normally used for automotive and aircraft. They are exclusively developed for the client that comes over and asks for a specific kind of performance fabric. So the apparel market, if we talk about, it's mainly divided into 5 main sectors. So we have a supermarket, we have high street, we have independent designers, we have ready to wear, and we have haute couture. And I hope you people might be aware the names actually have been given on the basis of that only. Okay, where do you find the usage of those apparels? So the most woven fabric types are used in all market levels with some minor modifications in weight, color fastness, or yarn content. That actually makes them being used in a particular category of these apparels. The type of garment that the fabric is designed for and its perceived value may sometimes be the only point of difference between how a given cloth is differentiated. So cheaper fabrics are used by the supermarkets whose bulk buying power also enables them buy some better quality fabrics at a lower price. On the other hand, the high street retailers vary in that some will demand high wearing, easy to launder fabrics, and others are looking for a lower quality fabric for fast fashion purposes. So the high street retailers will have their own, like I told you, the brand people, they normally suggest their own colors and requirements and make you design them according to them. So ready to wear, as already mentioned, look to use more usual fabrics with some point of difference. And this may be in the use of fancy yarns or more expensive constructions or exclusive fibers. And haute couture is a very special category where you go for, you don't bother about the price and you are actually looking for the greatest aesthetics that you can get from those apparels. Interior textiles, if we talk about, they can be segmented into 2 main categories, that is contract finishing for hotels, offices, and other public buildings, and home furnishings. That is for the interiors of your home. So woven textiles, in this area, They can be used for the bathroom, bedroom, dining room, and upholstery and flooring. And they are required to perform to a level suitable to last the lifetime of the product, be suitable for its end use, and include any requirements of aftercare in order to maintain appearance. So we are more bothered about the lifetime performance of these interior fabrics or home furnishings, and usually more stringent qualities are required for contract furnishings because we are using them in places which are public places, and they need to maintain their performance and aesthetics over a period of time. So designers in this field, they need to consider weave construction and float length in order to meet the abrasion requirements, because these could be carpets or the wall hangings of curtains or upholstery, other upholstery products which are talked about here. So they also need to consider the abrasion requirements, the color fastness of the yarn, so that they do not fade or transfer dye, and of course the flammability and the suitability of the fabric for laundering or dry cleaning. So according to the type of interior structures or textile materials that we talk about, we have to keep all these aspects in mind, and all these aspects are related to the initial stage of designing and the selection of material for that particular application. Talking about the performance fabrics, of course, woven fabrics, they are used in many of the industries which are which need high performance, quality, and durability. And some of the products within this category need to have some aesthetic importance also, like the ones which are used in transportation, seating fabric for automotive and aircraft. So the final look for appearance is, however, a secondary consideration. In case of performance fabrics, we are more worried about the functional aspect. And in this category also, if we talk about medical textiles or geotextiles, there the aesthetic takes a second place or the back seat. We are more worried about the performance of the fabric. So you need to design them, not keeping in mind the prominency of the structural appearance. We are more worried about the functional appearance, functional performance. So the future things, the ability to innovate, reinvent, and add value are as important now as they ever have been in the long established weaving industry. And the performance textile weavers invest a lot of capital in the research and development of the new products that keep them at the cutting edge and open up potential new areas of business. So when we say that we have to focus on the niche areas of the business where the fabric production is for a high-end product or more discerning customer, then we have to be really very careful while we are designing and selecting the raw materials for a particular kind of performance fabric. And the key themes of smart textiles, nanotechnology, sustainability, and three-dimensional weaving, they are now at the forefront of the technical innovation in weaving. So last but not the least, which everybody talks about these days, is sustainability. And the sustainable choice is the mantra today for any area that we talk about. So the future strategy for many high-end European mills is to pursue a sustainable or eco route in the development of their products and production of their cloths. So Europeans have already started it. We need to follow it dedicatedly if we want the future generation to stay safe and use these kind of materials. So high-quality textile producers are aware that their customer base has socio-environmental concerns, and valuing the craftsmanship and tradition are as important as the eco-credentials of the yarns and processes. So nowadays, we are not only concentrating upon the designing aspect, but designing keeping in mind the sustainability. And this sustainable approach to design is the key to the survival of fabric producers from all areas of the industry, be it the apparel, interior, or technical use of these textiles. So that's it with my presentation. Now I can have your questions, please.
Any question from the participants?
No questions.
There are no questions in the chat.
Either nobody was hearing or the presentation was so good that you don't have any question?
No, ma'am, the presentation was really good.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So thank you,
Okay,
ma'am.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
The whole presentation on weaves for fabric design was very interesting and informative. I hope the quality and the content of the presentation have served its purpose and made all the participants gain knowledge of the weaves. Thank you so much, ma'am, for your valuable input. Thank you.
So we'll be ending with the sessions for today, and we start at 9:30 sharp tomorrow. And hope that all of you join timely for the first session, which was initially was going to be conducted by me, but it has been modified a little. Dr. A.K. Chaudhary would be taking that session, and I'll take your session at 11:30 again tomorrow. So please be there at the right time, that is 9:30. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.